How are you doing today, George?
It's Terrific Tuesday.
That it is, and we got another good week of weather. I know
Dude, I'm
you were
excited.
just about to look out the window to
I
to
know.
check.
It is bright and sunny. I was out watching the pups this morning, man. I mean,
Yeah,
this is a great week for weather. This is the kind of weather where you just want, this is the way you want it year round. For
all
me,
year,
I take this all year.
all year, absolutely. All right, so we've got a couple questions that are individual questions by themselves, but kind of form a pattern. So I don't know if you want me. I had a couple different questions about inspections that I've been saving up for you. So do you want
Well,
me to just run through all of them in a row and you can just kind of riff and go back and forth for a couple minutes?
yeah, however you want to do it. However you want
All
to do
right.
it. 'Cause I got a few that came up regarding closings and, closing costs. What does it mean? When do I get these documents? Things like that came up, because we have that closing that's coming up next week.
Yep.
And they reached out to me the other day and just said, "Hey, we want to make sure we understand." And of course, I pointed them back to you, but I gave them a quick highlight.
Yep.
So,
Perfect. All right. Well, listen, I'll kick it off. A big one that I've heard people ask, and that also I'm a little, questionable out as well, is what if the inspector misses something? Does that
oh,
happen?
huh? Um, okay, that's a hmm. What if the inspector misses something? Well, the first question is going to be is how did you determine they missed it? So I'll give a simple example. Let's say so all inspection companies, whether you're working with a solo guy or you're working with something that's a franchise group or something like that, they'll have systems and processes because they have to provide a report at the end of the inspection. That report is I still have the report from when I purchased my house. Okay, and it's sitting in a binder in the garage, and I'm not kidding. Not as frequently as I used to, but I will still go back and go, oh yeah, I got to do that every year. But they provide a report because the report is it's the grading, if you will, on the house.
Yeah.
So if they miss something, then that means that it would be a blank in the report. And let's say that they did. Let's say that they didn't capture the age of the water heater. Okay. Now there's a question of did they miss it or were they just not able to get it? But if they miss that, then and it becomes a problem later on, then I have to assume that the buyer's going to turn around and probably seek some form of remedy against the inspection group, whether that's again a solo person or a franchise group, whatever it may be. Because if they bought the house thinking that hey, the water heater looked good, there wasn't any obvious signs of deterioration or anything like that. I use water heater because that's something that comes up that is always something that comes up in question because water heaters have a life to them, and that has been a point of contention in the last couple of years as people have been buying houses and waiving inspections. So if they miss boy, that has not happened to me yet where an inspector's missed something. I mean, I work with groups that I know their process, I know their reports, I review all the reports with our buyers. But if they miss something, yeah, that would be the first thing that would have to happen is the buyer would probably be going back to the inspection group, addressing it first with them, because it would have to be quote unquote proven that they missed it. If it's simply an absence from the report, then they should at least have photos, and so if they can show the photos that they did capture it. And again, using the water heater example, if they couldn't find the serial number to get the age of install, then that would be different. But boy, that would be
Well, so it sounds like they have thorough enough checklists that
yeah.
if you're missing a box, it's because you didn't go into the bathroom and check to make sure that there's GFCI outlets within,
Okay.
X
Here,
distance.
I'll give you an example of something that gets missed, but
Mm-hmm.
noted as being missed. Okay. So sometimes when an inspector goes into a house, let's say they're going to go into the attic. Okay. So there's a pull down and they're going up into the attic. But let's say when they try to go up the attic is just loaded with stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. They're going to put a notation on there that they could not perform the inspection of X part of the attic and roof because it was prohibited, blocked by, personal belongings and things. So in that case, it may be quote unquote missing from the report, meaning the inspection of the attic, but it should be noted as to why it's not there. So yes,
Mm-hmm.
they have very, very detailed checklists. And in the intent of them using these systems. I mean, some guys I know, they go through everything. They're sitting there on a pad and they're going through check, 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 check. And some of it is kind of standardized, but they're required to show that they checked every single outlet in the house, that they opened every single window in the house.
Wow.
they have to check. They have to show that they've checked to make sure that there's the emergency shut off on the boiler. If that's missing, they'll make notation if there are service tags on the boiler, for example, because that's something that the buyer should be aware of. When was the last time it was serviced? So the home inspection process, for them to miss something, I'm sure it has happened. It has never happened with me. I work with 3 groups in particular. One is a solo guy. The other 2 are both. One's an in-state group. Actually, they're across most of New England. The other one's a large franchise. They all have standardized systems. And even the solo guy, they have to go through rigorous training. So I could go on with that, but it's never happened with any of my clients.
Well, so it wasn't one of my original questions, but you're making me think it now. And I know it's a short-ish answer. How long does an inspection normally take?
Great question. So most people should plan at least an hour and a half to 2 hours for a standard size house. So 1,500 square foot, 3-bed, 2-bath house, plan about an hour and a half to 2 hours, because there's the walkthrough on the exterior, then there's the interior and all of that. But if it's a multifamily, it can take longer, and it may require 2 inspectors. If it's just a large house, let's say you're buying a 4,000 square foot house, it's obviously going to take longer, and there may be 2 inspectors. So I try to tell people, if your inspection is scheduled at 1 p.m., most inspectors will get there about 10, 15 minutes early. Plan to be there for at least 2 hours, because at the end of it, they're going to walk you through that report at a high level, at least tell you the major observations, and then they release the report. Most companies that have these systems built in can release the report the same day. Others will release it the next day. But 2 hours is the average.
Yeah. All right. So that's kind of leading into another one here.
Okay.
What does it mean when your inspection is for informational purposes only? Is it less of an inspection?
No. And that's become a way that people are writing offers to try and make the offer look more attractive. What it means is, if I'm the buyer and I'm putting in an offer and I write that my inspection will be for information purposes only, it means I am at that point in time foregoing the right to negotiate on findings. Mm-hmm. Okay. I can still walk away. Okay. You're not beholden to the contract then. You can still walk away. You're using that inspection to gain information about the house. But you're telling the seller, but if I find that there's a bunch of broken windows that can't open and close, I'm not coming back to you saying, hey, look, you got to fix the windows, because I told you that it was for my information purposes only. Now, you can still do that, but what the seller's going to do is say, you told me you're only doing information purposes only. Go away, goodbye, I'm done. But in information purposes only fundamentally means that you're not expecting to try and lower the price or negotiate for something to be repaired or credited, whatever, because of something you found added. You are simply going in to learn about the house and confirm that you still want to proceed with the house in its current condition. That's different than, and we could go down this rabbit hole later on, but that's different than the seller saying this is an as-is sale. That is different. A buyer putting inspection for information purposes only simply says, look, I don't plan to, I just want to confirm things. I'm good. Everything I saw in the house looked good at the showings. I didn't see anything that was of an obvious concern, so we're really not worried about it. What we also do with some of my buyers, we put in that it is for information purposes only up to $1 amount.
Okay.
So that if, for example, we see walking through and we say, you know what, everything looks really good, but that water heater might be beyond age, and geez, there's no service tags on the boiler. And you know what, we see some seepage around the seal at the top of the oil tank. We're just not sure about the maintenance on these things. So, something we're going to put in for information purposes only up to $2,000. Meaning that if an inspector goes through and finds things, and based upon what we know is general industry numbers, or if we feel we have to go get another contractor to come in and validate things, and that dollar amount is excess of $2,000, now we have the right to go back to the seller and say, hey, listen, here's what we found. Here we had some estimates pulled together. This is the dollar amount of that. We want to discuss the difference. The difference, not the totality, the difference.
And these are all different than also just waiving inspections, obviously. When you waive, you're just saying, I'm
done.
Rolling the dice.
You are effectively saying to somebody, hey, listen, if I take a house for information for waiver of inspections, I'm going straight to appraisal and title. Okay. And you can ask for access to the house still because you want to view things, but you have absolutely
So
I think it's the worst
I hear
idea
it
in the world.
as a subtle difference, but it's a huge difference, right?
Yeah.
So if once you say waive inspections, there is no, you
You're
can't
done.
back out because you go and look through the house and you're like, oh, you know what? The chimney actually looks older than I thought originally. I'd like to back out.
It could be something as simple as you found a broken wall switch. You don't have the right to say that that is a reason to cancel.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't have to be anything major. You could walk up and you go to turn the latch on the front door and the door handle breaks.
Great first impression.
No, but that door would have been checked during an inspection.
Yeah.
So if the door handle breaks, and this is obviously before appraisal, but I mean, if it breaks at the walkthrough, that's a totally different thing. But the point is, you waive inspections. You are foregoing your means of protecting your understanding of that house before it goes through title or appraisal review. I mean, I hate that idea. I have had people put offers in on properties I've listed where they've waived inspections, and I call the seller and I say, listen, they're waiving inspections. So if they want to do that, that's their choice, but I've actually had sellers say, I don't want that buyer.
Yeah.
And the reason why is it's a red flag to the aggressiveness of the buyer.
Desperate or something.
And you start to think to yourself, are they going to get cold feet because maybe they offered well over list price, they waived inspections, and they put in an appraisal gap rider. Okay, this is a desperation purchase. Is this somebody that's going to see it through?
Yep.
Remember,
that makes sense.
We always say sellers look for the least risk. Waiving inspections is not necessarily removing risk for a seller. Definitely create.
Now, here's the last one that I know for a fact that we have seen on multiple properties, that it's a concern that comes up. I don't want to say frequently, but with some regularity. A kitchen in the basement, a bathroom, some work that was done that is questionable as far as was it permitted and what are the effects of that. So say they did a great job though. Say they added a kitchen in the basement and it looks fantastic. What if it's not permitted? What does that mean? How do we find out?
Okay, well, let's start with what this. Okay, so if we walk into a house, there's a lot of layers into this example. So I want to keep this simple. Bill, if you're my client and you said to me, "Hey George, I'm really interested in 123 Happy Street." Mm-hmm. First and foremost, I'm going to double check to make sure that it meets the criteria we've talked about. That it's where you want to be, that it's got the beds, the bath, et cetera, and so forth. Then I'm going to go and I'm going to look at the square footage total. Okay. The reason why I always look at square footage totals because you see what's the total gross square footage. Then you have to look at the living square footage. Then you have to look at the unfinished. And if I see that in this house, there's a kitchen in the basement and it looks fantastic and everything, I'm going to look and go, okay, what is that on record? So then I'm going to go to the property card. If it's not on the property card and it doesn't show the basement as being finished space, then you start to question, okay, was the work done that was non-permitted or were the permits just never closed out? Because unfortunately, a lot of people who do work on their homes don't realize that the permit has to be closed out if they opened it in their name. If the contractor opened it, it's contractor's responsibility to close it out. But so if we see that there's a kitchen in the basement and we say, boy, it looks really good, but when we check the property card, we see nothing about finished space, we call the town. Town says there are no permits on record for that. Bing, 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 bing. Now you have to start asking questions. And the reason why is because an insurance company may not insure that space. So if that kitchen, let's say it develops a leak, let's say that there's a plumbing breakdown in that kitchen, 6 months after you bought it, and you go to file an insurance claim, the insurance company say, well, there's no record of that kitchen being there. They may not cover you for that claim. I say may because I don't know insurance regulations or anything, but that can cause headaches. So what we always do is if we see that work was done, we check to make sure that it was permitted work. If the house is being listed as recently renovated, the first thing we do is we call the listing agent and say, will the seller be able to provide confirmation of a certificate of occupancy if it warrants that level of work, if it had a building, electrical, and plumbing permit. Mm-hmm. And we're going to say, are the permits closed out? I will give you an example where a transaction that I was on, permits had not been closed out from 10 years prior. Okay. It was an oversight. The work was all done with contractors. There was no question about the quality of the work or anything like that. However, because the work was done, it was more than 10 years, but let's say it was 10 years prior, codes changed since then. So to have that sale addressed because it was an open permit, the seller had to bring somebody out to look at the property, have it inspected. The inspector said, well, now it was code then, but code now says you also have to do the following. So the seller had to address that, even though the work had been done, a decade ago and was done correctly, et cetera, and so forth, but because of time lapse. So this is where you get into, if work was done that was non-permitted, can you get what's called retro permit, which is where the town will send out the inspector and the inspector will test everything. Now, they can only inspect what they can see. So if you put in a kitchen and you put up drywall and you have all your plumbing running behind it, the inspector's going to come out and check everything. They're going to turn the faucet on. They're going to check all that. They're going to flip the lights. They're going to expect that the work appears to have been done professionally. All right, and they will grant what each town handles it differently. So you have to talk to the town, but they may grant what's called a retro permit, where the homeowner then has to pay a fine. The value of what the estimated work would have been. Blah blah blah. If that inspector comes out to do that and finds something is not to code, though, let's say that you put in I don't know, you put in a window, you blew out part of the wall and you put in a window, and for whatever reason that window is too low. Okay. The inspector may say, well, because of the window type, blah, 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 it's too low to the ground. So that doesn't meet code. I'm making up an example, but you'd be required to remediate that. So you can have things where an inspector says, hey, listen, the work you did, it all looks great. However, code has changed. And so now, since I'm looking at it now, not then, you have to bring it up to current code. Or, hey, look, the work was done. I got some questions about the quality of that work. I see some issues along the way here. Nope, this has to be redone because it does not appear to meet code, or I can see something that's the evidence of it not meeting code. So non-permitted work can create a lot of headaches, especially if a seller and listing agent do not disclose upfront that it's non-permitted work. Yeah. Great example, multifamily. You have a two-family unit, and it's one unit on top of the other. Well, the upper unit has access to the attic. They go in and they refinish the attic, and they create more living space. And they try to now turn that into a third unit. If that is not on record as a verified third unit, where the building is recognized as being, a total of 3 units, you're not going to get a loan for that.
Yeah.
FHA is not going to accept that because it's non-permitted ad.
I was just going to say that's leaked over into appraisals before, hasn't it? These issues of, non-permitted space, and, it's great that you finished off your basement, but it's not finished with the town and you're not getting credit for it as living space.
Nope. Those are good questions, Bill. There's a lot that comes up into that non-permitted stuff, though. I mean, that is a conversation in and of itself. That has burned quite a few clients on both sides.
I've had some closings delayed weeks, maybe even a month, because we get to the end and all of a sudden, oh, whoops, we found out that there are some open permits, and the seller, is now 2 states away, and, they have to come back and close it out themselves. And it can be, could be a nightmare.
This is why we always say, listen, when you're looking at a house, know your criteria, verify that criteria before you go into it, look at the property card, do all that diligence. I mean, I know it sounds like a lot of work when you're struggling to get out and do showings on a limited inventory, but you don't skip these steps. You don't waive inspections, for example. You do the diligence to make sure, because what you don't want to do is go running into a property where you're probably going to put money into it, a high offer or something, and then find this out after you've gone under contract. Because guess what? You've now just spent time and effort. You've taken yourself out of the search for homes, blah, blah, blah. I could go on. All right. Hey, listen, I've got some questions for you. All right. And because you just mentioned a second ago about closing. All right. So one of the questions that comes up frequently, and I probably had this question come up, I'm going to say 7-8 times over the last 2 weeks. Okay.
Yep.
What are closing costs?
Yeah. So I like to break it down into 3 categories that go into your final closing figure. Your down payment, which is the big one that everyone assumes. When somebody's talking about buying a home, they're like, yeah, I know that I have to do, the 3.5%, 3%, 5%, 20%, whatever it is down. They're like, yeah, I know that. And then it's the closing costs that I say, well, it's also going to be another, $10,000. And they go, whoa, wait, what? So there's the down payment. There are the lender and attorney fees, which you typically call the closing costs. And then there's also prepaid fees and escrow funding fees that go into your final closing figure. If we're just talking about closing costs themselves, that's lender and attorney fees. That is, credit report appraisal fees. So for an a lender side of it, it's usually a set amount. We have a processing fee, an underwriting fee. The credit report fee doesn't change much. The appraisal fee depends on the type of the loan, the type of the property, but it's set for that. There are some tax service fees and blah, blah, blah. There are a bunch of fees that go into just being able to close a loan. There's also the attorney's fees that get wrapped into that closing cost section, I'd say. Those are generally pretty set depending on the property. There's not a lot of flux. There is some title insurance that's going to adjust depending on the purchase price of the property, the value of the property. But usually, an attorney has a fee to do title work, and whether the house is $1 million home or a $200,000 home, the cost to do that title work is usually the same. If things get complicated, there can be more costs, but that's kind of on the attorney side. So I like to tell people, for your typical purchase, first-time home buyer, expect about $4,500 of closing cost fees between the attorney, the lender, and all the title insurance and all of those. As the properties start to go up in value, those are going to creep up a little bit. 5,000, 55, maybe
that's
6.
mainly because of title, right?
And that's mainly because of title. The cost of that title insurance is the variable there. Again, the lender fees are pretty much set. Depending, it's across the board. So if you're buying a $100,000 condo or a $700,000 home.
Okay, so 2 things that you didn't touch on in there. One of them I already know how you're going to answer. So, for example, buyer will say, "Well, do my closing costs account for the inspection?"
No.
Okay.
Nope. So doesn't account for the inspection. Does account for the appraisal. You pay the appraisal. That's the only cost during the process. So you have your deposit check. That's another one that you write. As soon as you go under contract. The only time I'm going to ask you for something dollar-wise prior to closing, though, is going to be for that appraisal. You're going to have to provide a credit or a debit card, and the appraisal company charges you directly. That's always included in your closing figures, but because it's prepaid, it kind of gets knocked off of your final closing amount that you have to bring to the closing table.
Okay. Property taxes.
Property taxes go into that third bucket, which is prepaids. So down payment, closing costs, lender attorney fees, prepaids and escrows. So you're going to have to prepay your homeowner's insurance for the year. You're going to do that at closing. And then you're going to have to catch up with some taxes. So depending on how the taxes are done for that town, you're either going to be getting paid back, but most cases you're going to be paying the seller back. So let's say that, property taxes are due in January for the house. The current owner pays those. They live there for 2 months and then sell their home. They've already paid for the 6-month stretch from January to June, though, for that whole stretch. So you now owe them those 4 months. Yeah.
So in that, let's stay on the closing conversation here for a second. So You've got your closing costs and certain things happen beforehand, et cetera. But one of the things that gets confusing, there are 2 terms. So let's break it down. The first term is closing disclosures and the release of closing disclosures and what that is and when that occurs. And the second is this, the holy grail moment of, hey, we've been issued clear to close, and that, I think some people actually look for a call it thing in the mail that says you're clear to close. I mean, so if you could clarify closing disclosure versus clear to close, when each one is noticed, and what is the responsibility of the buyer at each of those points?
So sometimes the clear to close can actually feel a little anticlimactic once we actually get there. If we're doing our diligence the whole way through, we've done a bunch of underwritings already.
Right.
That clear to close is just kind of checking the final boxes. There are some final things that they have to check: credit, income, make sure you're still employed, final asset check. But a lot of it, if we've already done our due diligence, it's, all right, hey, George, good news, we're clear to close. So the clear to close is the thing that everyone thinks about. But honestly, the CD to me is the more important, your closing disclosure. So the clear to close is a non-event for the seller in some instances because they don't have to do anything.
Right.
And we can get the clear to close the day before. I've had instances where we're, rushing and all of a sudden something changed with income and we have to get updates. I've had the clear to close in the morning and we close in the afternoon. The closing disclosure is the final document that says, hey, this is what your monthly payment is. This is what you have to bring to closing. And we release an initial CD 3 days prior to closing. there is a regulated time frame where you must receive and sign a closing disclosure 3 days prior to closing. So if we're going to close on a Friday, then on Tuesday, so Tuesday you have to get it and sign it. Wednesday, Thursday, we can close on Friday. So the CD to me is one of the bigger events, because if we don't get that out in time, we don't close on a set date. So when I say to somebody, hey, the CD is going out today, you absolutely must sign before midnight. That is a little bit more important in my eyes, because, you know, we might have already gotten the clear to close. We might be getting the clear to close tomorrow. But that CD, if it's not signed in time, we're not closing, no matter how badly you want to. This is a government regulated time frame. We cannot violate it.
Is that loan specific though?
So I have had some investor loans where I think that they've done it quicker if it's non-QM. So it's mostly the qualified mortgages.
Right. We'll take that as there is a loan product out there that but it's not
for 99% of people. Right. That is, you're never going to hear about that in your life. For most people, they're buying their primary residences. They're buying maybe a secondary home.
Right.
3 days is what you need to know.
All right. Listen, I've got a short morning here. I know you do as well. So we're going to keep this brief here and wrap up. A lot goes into the closing, you know, and again, we've talked about this a number of times. So we're gonna have put together that call, 45-minute video where we're gonna take on the process of buying, because, you know, we talk about inspections and appraisals, closing costs, CDs, CTC, clear to close, you know, all that. I think when as everybody hears these questions getting answered, the picture gets a little bit clearer. But we're gonna lay out that picture as we've talked about. All right, listen. I need to catch up with you after we hang up from here. I've got 2 things to cover with you there, but otherwise, listen, I hope you have a great day, man. It's
perfect.
I'm going to say what I'm not supposed to say. It's not Terrific Tuesday. It's Tequila Tuesday.
Just wait until 5.
Yeah. It's 5 o'clock somewhere.
You're almost there.
All right, man. Okay.